Water is an excellent solvent, which means it has the ability to hold lots of other molecules in suspension. The key to understanding why water is a terrific solvent is that the molecule contains partial charges. The oxygen is partially negative, and the hydrogens are partially positive. This delta symbol just means partial. When water molecules are near each other, the opposite charges attract. Negative oxygen atoms are attracted to positive hydrogen atoms. The weak hydrogen bond that results is constantly breaking and forming at room temperature. In fact, the bonds between water molecules in a glass of water will break and form every few trillionth of a second. So what determines whether a molecule will dissolve in water? Not all molecules will dissolve. The molecule has to have a charge for water to dissolve it. Charged molecules are considered polar or hydrophilic. The bond types in the molecule determine whether it will have a charge or not. In the case of salt, the bond type holding sodium and chlorine together is ionic. Ionic bonds are strong bonds that occur when electrons are completely transferred from one atom to the other. When water breaks the bond, ions, sodium and chlorine, are formed. Each have a full charge, as indicated by the plus and minus sign. Ions like these are polar, and they readily dissolve in water. Molecules with polar covalent bonds are also water-soluble and hydrophilic because they have partial charges. Examples of polar covalent bonds are oxygen to hydrogen and nitrogen to hydrogen bonds. When oxygen or nitrogen pairs up with the hydrogen, an unequal sharing of electrons occurs. Since electrons are negative, they will bring on a negative charge wherever they hang out. Imagine that this yellow atom represents nitrogen and the blue atom represents hydrogen. Nitrogen has a strong attraction for electrons, so it will pull hydrogen's electrons towards it most of the time. This brings on a partial negative charge for nitrogen and a partial positive charge for hydrogen. The same goes for oxygen bonded to hydrogen, as in the case of water molecules. Oxygen exerts a pull on hydrogen's electron, which causes it to take on a partial negative charge, leaving hydrogen with a partially positive charge. Polar covalent bonds allow molecules to dissolve in water, and you'll see these bonds used in water molecules, sugar molecules, DNA, and some proteins. Finally, molecules with non-polar covalent bonds share electrons equally. This neutralizes charges so that water has nothing to attach to. Fat molecules are made up of these bonds and will not dissolve in water. Let's look at ionically bonded molecules in water. When you drop a salt crystal into a glass of water, it immediately disappears. But where does it go? As the salt crystals enter the already dynamic system of water molecules, water surrounds the crystal and breaks it apart into individual ions. By attaching to the charges around the ions, it's able to dissolve and be suspended in water. Remember that opposites attract in chemistry. And so note that the positive atoms on water are attracted to the negative chlorine and vice versa for sodium. In this way, water holds the atoms in suspension and they disappear in water. Salt is considered water soluble. Let's see how the chemistry works when sugar dissolves in water. Sugars contain both polar and non-polar covalent bonds. To find the polar covalent bonds, look for any O to H or N to H. This sugar molecule has 5 O to H groups all around it, which are polar covalently bonded. The O to H groups bring partial charges to the molecule, and they make it polar. The oxygens are partially negative, and the hydrogens are partially positive on these O to H groups. When sugar is added to water, water molecules will surround the sugar by attaching to those O to H groups, suspending it in solution, like you see here. We'll apply this to understanding how polarity affects the function of large molecules within cells, like lipids, nucleic acids, proteins, and carbohydrates. We'll also apply this to understanding heart disease.